Yes, I was. A matter of fact, we were having some technical issues. I was in the process of sending a text to her with the link. So, all right, very good.
Hi. Luckily,
Hello.
it's
Hello, Heidi,
updated really
joining us.
quickly. So, hi, everybody.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much for joining us. And I'd like to introduce to each and every one of you Miss Heidi Brandis, who is the president of the Oklahoma Society of Professional Journalists, the professional chapter. And some of you have had the opportunity to meet her. As a matter of fact, Mr. Gray, and who's our assistant managing editor, and then Mr. Stuart Watson, who's our president of our Tulsa chapter, and Miss Nyborg, who won an award this past session and when we attended the state conference there in Lawton. But we're very thankful that you're here today, and we've briefed the students about some of the things that you may be talking about. But I think the essence of what I think will be important for them to know is what maybe you observed in relationship to changes that are occurring in the industry and advice you'll give. Now, what I'll end up doing for the benefit of kind of a structure that we've developed is I start with this initial question and maybe direction, and then I'll pass it to Ms. Levrault, and she'll be commandeering the program going forward.
Okay.
But in starting a conversation, maybe tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we can ease into the question and answer session.
Yeah, sure. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, we
Thumbs
can.
up, yes.
Wonderful.
Can you hear me? Okay. Well, I'm Heidi Brandis, like Dr. Jerry said. I am the president of the Oklahoma Pro Chapter for the Society of Professional Journalists. But beyond that, I've been a journalist pretty much my entire career. I graduated from UCO with a degree in professional writing, actually, and kind of popped around some smaller newspapers. Got my start at the Medill Record in Medill, Oklahoma. Served as county and education editor at the Duncan Banner for a couple of years, and then went to the More American, which is no longer around, but that was during the 1999 tornado that kind of obliterated More. So that was a big story. After that, I was part of the CNHI newspaper chain and was in charge of the Eastern Oklahoma County newspaper group, which included at one time 11 newspapers. Worked there for about 7 years. Here's a little hint for you. If you get into a fight with your new publisher and you call her an ignorant witch who has no idea about journalism ethics, she'll fire you. So I was let go and decided to try my hand at public relations and media relations. Ended up working as media relations director for the Salvation Army of Central Oklahoma for about 7 years. During that time, however, I was still freelancing because I love writing. I loved being a journalist, and the extra moolah didn't hurt any. So I started freelancing on the side. And it got to the point after about 5 or 6 years where I was making enough money on the side freelancing that I could conceivably quit my job and give it a go. And there's never any good time to quit your stable, well-paying job to go freelance, but I decided I'd give it a year. I figured the worst that could happen is I'd fail and I'd go get another job that I love to do, or, end up in the Salvation Army food line. But now it's been 10 years. So in fact, October was my 10th anniversary of being a full-time freelance journalist. For about 6 of those years, I still did hard news and investigative reporting work. In 2016, I kind of transitioned more to magazine feature and travel writing because frankly, after 20 years covering really horrible politics, dead babies, and going to executions, kind of wears on you. I knew travel journalism and feature journalism was a thing, and kind of fell face first into that. So now that's what I do. I still do some hard news reporting, some investigative work, some business reporting, but mostly magazine work and travel writing. So that's Heidi Brandis in a nutshell.
Awesome. Well, it is so wonderful to have you here. I'm Sam. I'm the managing editor. It's nice to meet you. And I also appreciate you talking a little bit about freelancing, because I know I recently got into that this past year. I just created an LLC, so that's wonderful to hear, and might pick your brain later about it.
Pick my brain right now. I mean, that's why we're
Awesome.
here, right?
Well, I do know you shared with us a link you wanted to share with our group, right? I believe it was about freelancing.
It was a little tweet I came across today, and it made me think of you guys. And it's just kind of some Twitter links to newsletters that are always putting out calls for pitches. So as a freelancer, there are a bunch of different avenues where I find magazines that are actively looking for pitches. And those are some good ones. I have a whole list of other ones that I'm more than happy to share with you guys, and other places and resources where you can find not only information on freelancing, writing a pitch letter, that sort of thing, but who's actively looking and how to pitch them. So
awesome. Well, I know we want to make the most of your time, so we won't go through it in depth, but we do have the link available, so we'll make sure we share it with everybody at the end and things like that. But you're here, you met our group at SPJ at the awards in Lawton. So wonderful to have that connection made. Can you explain what SPJ does for Oklahoma specifically? Because it's a large national organization. But how does it help with Oklahoma?
SPJ was formed, it is the professional organization that mainly focuses on the ethics of journalism. So the ethics of, writing your story, the ethics of interviewing, protecting journalists when they're threatened because they're just doing their job, things like that. In Oklahoma, we have a very strong networking component to us. We like to connect journalists with each other. We do the annual contest every year, of course, and that's a big deal because it is one of the few organizations in the state, and there are a handful that reward journalists for their hard work, for their talent in writing, for the work they put into deep investigative journalism, and everything from broadcast to radio to online. And that's a big thing, is the online journalism and the broadcast journalism, because I don't think it comes as any surprise that print is a struggling medium. And you guys will be the first to know this, but we are completely revamping the contest for next year. So it's been very, very print heavy, and it's a little bit outdated. So we're really going to focus more on the new media, the multimedia and the digital sphere and the broadcast sphere, podcasting, radio sphere. So, but for the most part, it's a great networking tool. And when you are a member of SPJ, everybody knows SPJ as you are trained in journalism ethics. You are an ethical journalist. And now more than ever, when journalists are being attacked, journalists are being mistrusted because smear campaigns and, fake news and all that kind of crap. I'm trying not to cuss. If I let a cuss word slip out, please forgive me. I'm got a mouth of a soldier, but it's more important now than ever to show the public that there is a code of ethics when it comes to disseminating information and news.
Absolutely. And especially, as you mentioned, with freelancing, but also just working for different publications, working under SPJ kind of gives, when an employee is looking, they know that you have an understanding of what ethics are, right? They know you have that structure built in. So you're more likely to get the job, the assignment, right? Especially using the networking.
It's kind of like that little badge of honor or that little certificate you have in your wall saying, I've been trained in this. So SPJ, they know that you have been trained or you're currently training constantly. We're constantly doing this because the world changes at a breakneck speed. And so does media, the digital sphere, the different platforms in which we're getting that news out. So we have to constantly adjust. Okay, what is our ethical role on Twitter? How do we make sure that we're still maintaining the standards of quality journalism and fair journalism, objective journalism, when you have to battle against, your own social media biases, and also try to get the news out as fast as possible. So, yeah, it's a constantly changing sphere of influence, but when you say you're SPJ, that means something in the journalism world.
Wonderful. And for so many of our writers are students, right?
Yeah.
These are some of their first writing jobs, their first chances to be published. Do you have any advice for them as they're developing their craft, or resources you can recommend through SPJ
Oh, God, yeah.
or otherwise to develop that skill?
When I was in college, I relied so heavily on my professors and my advisors, and also being part of the student journalism. At the time, it was a newspaper. Came out once a week. I think maybe it was twice a week. It's been a while since I've been in college. But having that hands-on experience, because you can learn theory all day long in classrooms. You can read about it, you can get it in your brain, but until you actually do it, and you have to come face to face with a source who doesn't want to talk to you, who hates you, who yells and screams at you, who tries to just tries to shut you down right to your face. It's a different ball game. And that happens at student publications too. I mean, student journalism, college journalism, high school journalism is real journalism. So you're getting real world experience. I often say that my first job at the Medill Record, which Medill is a tiny little community by Lake Texoma, I learned more in those 9 months than I ever did in college, at no fault to my professors because they were amazing, but just having that hands-on real world experience. Do it. Start freelancing now, take on assignments, reach out to Tulsa people or whomever you have in your area, offer to write a couple small pieces. As a freelance journalist, I say never write for free, but if you're trying to build up a portfolio, it's a good practice. Get involved with your student organizations, journalism organizations, write for the college paper, broadcast, TV station, radio, whatever it is you have. Because like everything else, whatever you dedicate time and practice to, you excel at. I think it's called the 10,000 hour theory or 2,000 hour theory. Whatever you dedicate 2,000 hours to, you become a master at. So,
awesome.
And even if you fail, I mean, even if you fail dramatically, you learn something from that fail too.
There's a lesson from it. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. And you'll learn not to do that again.
The worst you can do is fail. Yeah. The worst you could do is fail. And next time you just improve, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That being said, you know, the state of employment in journalism is up in the air too, which is why I can make a livable wage as a freelancer. I don't work for any one organization. I write for multiples. I have to sell myself on a constant basis. So say you're not involved in your student newspaper, reach out to the magazines in your area, the radio stations in your area, your church newsletter, whatever it is you have, and just start contributing. Because one, you need to build up your clips. Even when you're applying for full-time employment, or especially if you're doing freelance, they're going to want to see what you've done. They want to see your talent. They want to see that you can actually write a story and more importantly, make deadlines, things like that. So anything you can do now to build up that portfolio, and you don't have to spend a fortune on a portfolio site. I did, but you know, this is my career. But there's a thing called Muckrack, and it's just MUCKRACK, and you can type in, just Google Muckrack in your name, and it automatically curates everything you've ever published that's findable online. So you can use that as a portfolio site. You don't actually have to build it from scratch. Don't reinvent the wheel. And I know a lot of professional journalists who refer to their Muckrack page when dealing with editors. So
wonderful. And you mentioned having the portfolio, building it up, but also restructuring the contest to include multimedia. Would you say it's important for journalists to be able to use multiple mediums?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And in fact, that's because, you know, I'm old school. I still remember having to do cut and paste and working in a darkroom. So it's a constant challenge to me to stay on top of new technology. But the phones these days, I mean, you can make entire movies just using apps and the camera on your phone. So that's one thing I'm kind of working on myself. And it's like, okay, how do I start incorporating video into the pieces I'm submitting? How do I do sound? I don't know. I always thought print was going to be here when I was in college, so I didn't study any of that. So looking back, study everything you can. If you can get into multimedia, take some voice lessons. I mean, or take speech or debate or whatever is offered at the college to, you know, improve the way you speak on camera. If you're nervous about it, you can use still photos and text over that. I mean, multimedia is the way it's going, because people, when they click on an article, some people read better, some people just want to watch videos, some people want to hear the podcast. So anything you can do to make yourself more skilled in all those areas, you're going to surpass old journalists like us, like that. And it's going to be necessary.
And accessibility is also something that is forefront in people's mind now as well. You know, having those multiple mediums so that's accessible to everybody, right? Because you're not just going to have the people who are reading on the weekend. You're going to have people who are picking up any time of day, but may want to listen again or
they're
read.
in the car, or, you know, they're cooking dinner. It's the only time they can really listen to the news, you know. So yeah, absolutely. And accessibility is a big thing. A lot of the professional writer groups I'm involved in, besides the SPJ, but also some of these other organizations, it's like, okay, how do we become more accessible to the hearing impaired, to the blind, to those who are, you know, mobility challenged? How do we, you know, reach them and become relevant in that way as well? So, oh gosh, we could go on a whole spider web of things that are changing in the world of journalism right now. So, but it's exciting too. You know, stuff that needed to happen.
Yeah, and there are so many ways that you can continue to develop those skills, right? I mean, we take classes at school that you can enroll for a single semester in 8 weeks and pick up a skill. But also there are workshops and things like that. Like SPJ will put those on, right? So
yeah, in fact,
what are some examples?
SPJ national, SPJ local, regional, because we're also part of what's called Region 8, which includes Oklahoma, Texas, and Arkansas, and things like that. There's always workshops going on. It covers everything from how to make an FOI, which is Freedom of Information Act request, to, you know, how to incorporate sound into your storytelling, to, gosh, how to do your taxes as a journalist, you know.
I got to account for that. Yeah.
Yes, I do too, because I know myself well enough. And I'm, even despite accounting, I still haven't paid my quarterly taxes this year. So bad, Heidi. I'm going to have a hefty tax bill at the end of the year. But there are so many other organizations too. I mean, if you just Google like journalism online workshops, there are some that are absolutely free. You know, how to write a lead that grabs an editor's attention, or, you know, YouTube 101, you know, things like that. There's some that have a minimal cost, say $15. In fact, I sent a friend of mine a link to a class on how to get started freelancing 101. It's a $15 class for 2 hours. And I'll send that link to you guys as well. And some of them can go real high. You know, you're looking at $500-$600 for an online course on writing. On the fence about those. I think you can get it cheaper from better places, but you know, people like me are trying to make money by sharing how to be a freelancer, you know, or whatever. So, but again, share my email with the class, because I'm always open to, if you have questions like, hey, are there some great cheap classes I can take on how to write a pitch letter? And I can refer that to you and help you out as much as you can, because that's also my role in the SPJ. We help each other out. We want to be a resource to all journalists, student journalists, veteran journalists, new journalists. So
absolutely. And that's something we wanted to make sure our students know, was it's not just as a student, right? There's a student membership, but you can keep this membership as you graduate, as you get into the field. Keep networking, keep developing those skills, right? Just keep going.
Yeah, because even as a student member of SPJ, you're going to be hobnobbing, you're going to be rubbing elbows with professional journalists, with editors, who other people are involved in the organization that you can turn to. And that's the nice thing about being part of an organization. You reach out to, say, John Small, who's an editor of a small town newspaper, and say, hey, do you know of anybody who's hiring? And it's like, yeah, they haven't advertised it yet, but you might want to look at the Lawton Constitution or something like that.
Mhm.
Or, I heard KJRH is looking for new reporters. And yeah, so networking, I would say, especially in the media business. I don't care if it's news media, entertainment media, podcasting, influencing, which they now call content creation, which is also a legit field. We can debate that for hours, but I think it's a legit field. It all comes down to who you know and who networking, who can help you out. So
Well,
the more people you get in contact with, God, the better chances you have.
and going to conferences, you'll realize how small the world actually is, right? Because you'll see people across the room that you could be on reporting on different sides of the world, but you guys know each other, right?
Oh yeah.
It's stay connected.
And you have the chance to actually turn to other journalists and say, hey, I know you did this story about the death penalty last year. I'm working on this story. It's kind of a different angle, but who would you recommend I talk to? And, and most of okay, sometimes journalists are going to go, my source, you can't have it. But for the most part, people are willing to help each other out because we're in the trenches together these days, and the more good reporting and the more we can help each other out, because you know what? He may help you out today, but tomorrow you might introduce him to the person who's going to hire him. So there's a lot of back scratching and kind of supporting each other in the journalism field. And it's the same way with travel writing. I go to conventions all the time. I went to Columbia for the Society for American Travel Writers, and I see the same faces, but I met new faces. And one of those faces introduced me digitally to the editor of AARP, which, by the way, pays $1 a word for an article. And that's how I got that contract. Yeah. So you're not writing for like $250 a story. Now you're writing $1 a word for a 2,000 word story. And that's what we do. And I introduced her to a couple of my editors, because she lives in Washington, D.C. She's not going to compete with me unless we're on the same trip together. But even then, if she introduced me to her editor when I'm on the same trip, I'm not pitching her editor. That's just like common courtesy, right?
Yeah.
So there's that, Coda. Hold on.
Okay.
I don't know if you guys can hear the screaming goats, but my phone was going off. Sorry.
All good. All good.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I can wax poetic about being a part of an organization forever, because it really is so important, if nothing else, for the networking and the contacts you'll make.
And what you kind of brought up was interesting about, other writers, because we were at a conference at UCO, and they had Oklahoma Media, OCMA, and Oklahoma Media Center, and they brought up a recent
Rob
trend.
Collins, right?
Yep. And they brought up a recent trend where publications that used to compete are now sharing resources, right? Is that something you've noticed, especially on the contest side, but also just seeing in publications people teaming up and sharing these resources?
Oh, absolutely. Like, I think the Frontier, which is based in Tulsa, and Oklahoma Watch have teamed up on a couple joint stories together. And the Oklahoma Media Center, of course, is all about that. It's like, how do we get all these organizations to work together so we have this cohesive media field where we have the best journalism? And, it's hard for one journalist, even if you work for, full time for an organization, to dedicate 3 or 4 months to one story. But if you're pulling from all these different organizations that are all kind of somehow involved in it, and you put out one big story, everybody shares it online, I really anticipate a lot more of that happening as resources shrink and shrink and shrink for journalism. And I think it's happened organically
Mhm.
because, at the risk of sounding like it's a conspiracy, there's not a whole lot of resources for journalism funding, especially federal funding for journalism. I mean, you've got every year the Oklahoma legislature, it's like, are we going to fund OETA, which is public broadcasting?
Mhm.
I mean, we're held by a chokehold. So, the more we can share resources, the better journalism is, and the more we can all survive. And yeah, we're going to see a lot more of that. A
Mhm.
lot more of that. I guarantee you. I'll lay money. I'll
Yeah.
bet you right $100 right now that
Yeah.
that's going to happen.
Well, and those networking opportunities are just going to help that more, right? I
Yeah.
mean, so many of those projects are made after somebody met each other, catching each other at the same stories, like, oh, you're working on this too. Why don't we combine, right? And then you get those longer stories, especially for the nonprofits like Oklahoma Watch or, things like that.
On doc, all of
Mhm.
those that are being funded privately or through nonprofit donations, things like that, because you simply don't have the staff you used to have. We don't have the big 50-person newsrooms anymore.
Mhm.
We got one journalist doing 6 different stories a week, and it's yeah. So and even in your class, I mean, or
Mhm.
your student publication, turn to your people and say, hey, could you call these people? Or,
Mhm.
hey, aren't you involved with this organization? Really need a quote. Why don't you go get that and I'll hunt this information down? And it becomes a team effort. It's so much easier than
Yeah.
killing yourself trying to
Oh,
do
yeah.
the big stories alone.
Well, I know we have 4 campus locations, right? All across town. So sometimes we've had that where we've had writers team up of, okay, you're going to be over there for your class. Can you take that photo while I'm over here in my class? And collaboration does really help. And I do want to let our group know if you have any questions. We're kind of coming towards the end. Want to give a last opportunity. If you have a question, stick in the chat. If not, we'll share your information afterwards and give people a chance to connect for anything after. Um, but
And
I want
about,
to know, do you have, go ahead.
no, I mean, just to kind of reiterate that whole kind of networking and getting to know other journalists and things like that. And of course, I'm speaking from kind of the freelance point of view because that's what I do. Non-doc will call me and say, hey, do you have some availability to do this story for us? So they've got staff writers. And same way with the journal record. Journal record's like, hey, we're coming up on Christmas season. We got a lot of people on vacation. Can you fill in? So yeah, I mean, the more people you know, and especially if you work with them, help them out. Hey, I saw you wrote this story. Can I have your source? You give them your source. They're going to think of you when they need somebody. It just helps everyone.
Mhm.
You'll find out really quick who the jerks are that only take, and don't give. But that's
Tulsa
just
and,
life.
Tulsa and Oklahoma are both places where you have a reputation, whether you want to or not. It's up to you to kind of build that and make it a reputable one, right? So,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
so
So yeah, I mean, I'll talk forever. So you
yeah.
got to shut me up on occasion.
Well, to kind of bring it back around to what our writers are focusing on in the next month or two is obviously contest ends at the end of the calendar year, right? So this is their last shot for the month of December. If there's anything they want to get out to be eligible, especially with the restructuring, what are some categories you can recommend for our students to maybe focus on when they're writing?
Well, right now we're in the baby steps of completely redoing all the categories
Mhm.
because it is outdated. It's very, very print heavy, and print, of course, is the weakest medium right now. So we're going to be expanding our broadcast, our online publication. We're kind of up in the air if we're going to split it up between newspaper A, newspaper B, different sizes newspapers, or even print versus broadcast. Maybe it's all best writing.
Mhm.
So I wish I had a stronger answer for you for that, but quite literally, we just talked about this yesterday and just
Yeah.
starting the process of what are our categories going to look like this year. They are going to be a lot less because, you know, it got to the point, it's like best photography for gardening, you know? So there's a lot of categories we can pare down and or combine. So hopefully by January, we'll have that new category list out there. But I absolutely encourage student journalists to enter the contest, because one of our big 3 winners was a student newspaper group. And it was almost unheard of. In fact, we got some slack from some old grumpy journalists about it. Like, students shouldn't win that. We're like, they earned it. So
Well,
because
it's just an example of you're as a student, you're getting the opportunity to work along professionals, right? You can compete, but also compare and learn.
compete against the professionals. But, you know, that being said, there was also some discussion of having a student journalism contest that's separate, where it's all the student journalists. But here's the fact, even if you're a first year journalism student, a 4th year journalism student, or wherever you are, you're still a journalist. You're a journalist right now. Just because maybe you don't have the years behind you and you're still learning the trade does not make you any less of a journalist, because you're providing that service, and it is incredibly important. I mean, student journalists won a Pulitzer, you know, back in the 70s for the Kent State thing, you know. It's legitimate, and don't ever, I would say my biggest advice to you as student journalists is don't ever sit there and go, oh, I shouldn't do that because I'm just student. You're as legit as everybody else. You are a journalist right now, and take it seriously. Take yourself seriously, and demand people take you seriously, because, you know, that's not going to go away. Even when you're 50 something, you're still going to have to demand respect from people, because the more and more bad press and fake news and slander campaigns against the press there are, the more we're going to have to defend ourselves. So
I would also go with that. I would say use it to your strength sometimes. I've used the student journalist angle to get into things that maybe they were a little, you know, they didn't want to at first, but then you're like, oh, it's a learning experience. All of a sudden people open up, right? So it's finding those strengths, finding those connections to get in whatever it takes, right?
I love that. I love that. I call it use every tool in your toolbox. Oh, little me. Oh, yes, you're going to underestimate me. Okay, thanks. And then you write your story and they're like, oh, shoot, shouldn't have underestimated her, you know?
But it helps
so
build that reputation, right?
it does. It does. Absolutely it does.
Awesome. Well, I will let Dr. Goodwin, if you have anything you wanted to make sure we cover or any topic we may have glanced over. I try to stick to my notes if possible, but I get distracted too. Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
I would love to introduce the newest board member for the Society for Professional Journalists Pro Chapter, Dr. Jerry Goodwin.
Yay.
He impressed us so much, and just that's one of our biggest goals this coming year, is to reach out more and become more of a resource to student journalists and to college level, even high school level journalists. And we had a long talk, and we felt that Dr. Goodwin could be nothing but an asset to our board. So
I appreciate the invitation, and we look forward to doing more with SPJ, and hopefully as you plan your activities for 2023, there will be an opportunity to do something here in Tulsa, and we'll be able to host it on campus.
We might hit you guys up for helping us with contests, like with judging and some planning and maybe you know, some logistics. But yeah, again, anytime you can help out, we will definitely turn to you, because, you know, when it comes down to it, we're all working journalists. So it's tough to run an organization and make a living at the same time. So.
Heidi, if there's something I'd like you to share with the group, I'm just fascinated and enthralled, and I guess just excited to hear about. There's probably a month that doesn't go by that you're not doing something exciting. And I don't know if there's something you've done recently or something you're planning to do, but I'd like to encourage each and every one of you to listen, because you're going to be just as excited and almost would quit your job and follow Heidi around, because it's just such an exciting life, but is there anything that you've done recently that you have plans for the future or you're doing currently in terms of your freelancing you want to share with us, maybe an experience?
Yeah, as a travel journalist, part of my job is to travel, and it's to travel the world for free. Because I get, it's a weird dynamic, but for instance, on Monday, I'm going to Vienna, Austria. I get back on the 5th, and then on the 9th, I'm going for 2 weeks to Ecuador on a very kind of sustainable cultural cruise, small ship expedition cruise. In January, 3 weeks in Antarctica. In February, doing a 1 week wolf trekking expedition in British Columbia. And it's this, I still can't believe this is my life. You know, my job is to travel the world and write amazing in-depth stories about it. Yeah, we all have to write the top 10 things to do in Ecuador, but then you can get into the deep, because travel journalism is real journalism. I mean, it covers history, it covers culture, it covers current events, politics, you know, who's suffering, who's not suffering. But yeah, I get to, I'm on the road more than I'm actually home, and I get to travel the world more or less for free, being hosted by destinations. And how that works is they pay for my airfare, they pay for my excursions, they pay for my food, they pay for my hotels, they pay for my rental cars, they pay for everything, but they don't pay me. I only get paid when I sell stories to magazines, and they know that. So they know I'm motivated to sell as many stories as I possibly can about that trip. So that's why I'm a good investment for them, especially if I've got a proven track record of being able to produce and get stories placed. So yeah, it's a freaking amazing life.
I would encourage you, if you'd be open to this, for those of you who would be interested in seeing where she's been and keep track of her future travels, if you'd be open to some of our students, and not all of them, befriending you on Facebook. And that's a great way to
absolutely.
follow.
I would say Instagram's probably better, because
Gotcha.
Facebook is is kind of my real life Heidi page. So
Okay.
you know, it's got my belly dancing on there, it's got my drinking on there, it's got my party pics on there. But
Instagram will
on
have the snapshots. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a crazy life. But on Instagram, I'm Heide Wright. It's spelled HeideWrite. There's no S on the end, and there's an E on the end of Heidi. But that I wish I could rename it, because I started that when I started freelancing 10 years ago, and we were all trying to be pithy and clever. Now I wish I could just say Heidi Brandis, you know. Also, my website is HeideBrandis.com. That's HeideBrandes.com. And that's kind of my portfolio site where you can see the stories I've written and things like that. And again, my email, now say it, get your pens ready. It's Heide, Heide, at Heide Writes, HeideWrItes.com. And email me with questions. You know, if you need advice, I may not answer right away, but I will answer, because sometimes on these trips we just don't have cell service or anything like that. But I mean, that's our role. I mean, Dr. Jerry can tell you the same thing. As people who have been in the business, our role is to mentor new people coming up in the business and make your job a lot easier than our job was. And I had so many people help me in my career. It's just paying it forward, you know. And, you know, we're going to have SPJ meetings, and you guys are all invited to SPJ meetings. We have guests all the time. We would love to have you guys sit in, contribute, things like that. And we'll be listing that on the Society for Professional Journalists Oklahoma Pro chapter page, with a Zoom link and everything else. And you guys absolutely invited to participate.
I'd like to make a suggestion. If the occasion ever arises where you're able to have an assistant, I'm sure many of the students would be open to serving as one of your assistants in one of your travels.
You know, sometimes I'm allowed to take photographers. So, but again,
There you
you
go.
know,
That's an open invitation to, as you get to know Heidi,
portfolio,
you never know
get
what
some things
opportunities might present
published.
themselves.
Yeah.
Well,
So,
I do want to say what I'm going to do is I'm going to collect all the resources and links you've provided us. I'm going to compile them all and share them with our group when we send an email, just kind of reviewing what we talked about today. So I'll include the muck rack. I'll include the Twitter link you shared us about freelancing resources,
send
SPJ's
you a
page, and
buttload more. I mean, there are some great newsletters out there with pitch calls. There's groups on Facebook that are constantly putting out pitch calls and things like that. But yeah, if nothing else, be part of the Society for Professional Journalists Oklahoma Pro Chapter Facebook page. And yeah, and do not hesitate to reach out to any board member, including Dr. Goodwin, about anything you might need help with. We're always eager to speak to classes, offer advice. I mean, that's our role as SPJ, as you asked at the very beginning. So.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I know we will probably have some questions come up later, and we'll just have them, contact you via email for them. I know I've got some
just send me a big list and I'll answer it.
Yeah. So, thank you again for visiting with us today.
For having me.
We're so glad to have you join us, and I'm sure we'll probably connect again next year, especially probably after contest once they've revealed what's going on and things. And you're always welcome
to see a lot of entries from TCC. So
we're
you guys are called out. You got to enter the contest.
Dr. Goodwin, I think we can do that, right?
I believe so. I think so.
All right. Well, cheers. And thank you for having me. I've really enjoyed this, and best of luck. And again, reach out if you guys need anything at all.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Bye.
I'd like to recognize Dr. Bailey before we adjourn. Dr. Bailey, would you like to offer anything? She's the coordinator for our program at TCC. Is there anything, Dr. Bailey, you'd like to add?
Yes. Let me, I've got a lot going on, so I apologize, but I'm really excited. I think we're going to have a wonderful organization. I'm so excited to be working with Oklahoma SPJ. I look forward to it. Yeah. Thank you so much for coming here.
Having me. And by the way, the students I did meet at the SPJ conference were extremely impressive. The board talked about them extensively in our board meeting. All good.
Wonderful. Oh, that's good to hear.
Yeah.
That's great to hear. Thank you.
You guys have a wonderful day. I got deadlines I got to meet.
Yes,
Thank
always
you.
important.
Thank
Take
you.
care. Everyone have a great week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.